Welcome to the Rediscover You in Midlife Pod Summit, hosted by The Roller Coaster. My name is Lucy Q. 5 years ago, the emotional turmoil of midlife turned my life into a shitstorm. To make things worse, I had no idea that my chaotic emotions were due to the roller coaster of midlife. I thought I was crazy, and I felt completely alone. I've come to realize that midlife is more than a list of symptoms that we have to endure or cure. Midlife is the beginning of our next chapters. This is our time to be heard, to live our best lives, and to fix those pesky hormones. Join me as I chat with experts and industry leaders about nutrition, bone health, hormones, mindset, healing, journaling, living life to the fullest, and yes, even sex. I'm inviting you to throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride. I was finally able to start my journaling practice back in 2018, but that was only after several failed attempts. Before I was really able to connect with journaling, I had purchased countless blank journals with high hopes of pouring myself onto their pages. Instead of spilling my words of wisdom and insight, I'd find myself sitting there just staring at blank pages, painfully trying to find something to write. That is why I created Your Journaling Journey, a quick start guide to begin your journaling practice today. Your Journaling Journey is a guided journal with daily prompts, gratitude, and affirmations. You can get your copy of Your Journaling Journey today on Amazon or check out the show notes for links. Welcome back to the Rediscover You in Midlife Pod Summit. I'm your host, Lucy Q, and joining me is Dr. Robin Buckley. Dr. Robin is a professional speaker, executive coach, and author. Her proprietary coaching model uses a business framework to support clients in executing strategic plans for developing their careers and their relationships. The owner of Insights Group Psychological and Coaching Services, Dr. Buckley has a Ph.D. in clinical psychology from Hofstra University. She has published 3 books, including Voices from the Village, Advice for Girls on the Verge of Adulthood. Dr. Buckley is also a columnist for Entrepreneur.com, and her 2022 TEDx was just published in September and has over 90,000 views. Welcome, Robin.
Thank you so much, Lucy. It's so exciting to be here.
That TEDx, 90,000 right off the bat. That's congratulations, because that's tough.
Thank you.
I had the privilege of just watching it, and I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I'm wondering if you can share with our listeners what that TEDx was about.
So the TEDx was inspired by my 2 daughters, and it was from a very personal situation where when my older daughter was 13, she shared with me that she had started to masturbate and was masturbating in a way that was not safe for her body. And that's how the TEDx starts, this TEDx talk. And so in that minute that we were sitting in the car, I just decided to buy her a vibrator because I wanted her to be safe, and I wanted to encourage her to continue these conversations with me, because otherwise our kids are getting information from the wrong sources, sometimes dangerous sources, whether it's the internet or peers who also don't have a clue what's going on. But the more I thought about it, the more it really translated that when we connect girls and adult women to that intimate, almost primal level of their, not just sexuality, their sexual pleasure, it gives them ownership of their bodies. They find their voices, and they realize they can ask for more of what they want in all areas of their life, which as women and as a generalization, we're not good at doing. We're good at prioritizing everyone else and everything else, but not us. And there's nothing wrong or selfish about it. And I usually talk to women about the idea, it's not about saying me first, it's about saying me too. I'm an equal priority, and that includes my sexual pleasure, that it's not about me giving and giving and giving. I can ask for what I want, I can demand what I want. And if we do that, I think that's where we start to find our voice to then make changes in other areas of the world, like cultural standards or political references or seats at the board table, whatever it might be. So that's the talk in a
It's
nutshell.
absolutely brilliant. I loved it. But watching it, I couldn't help but wonder if it's also a symptom of us Gen X women. Because I think back to high
Mm,
school and you were either frigid or a slut.
yeah, yeah,
And really your only form of communication or learning about sex was porn,
yeah.
and really bad
Yep.
porn. Um, and I think that sort of carried for many of us women, that sort of carried through where we never understood about our own pleasure and, things like an
Right.
orgasm. And I'll fully admit, I don't think I even knew that I had or even had an orgasm until in my 30s, because it's just,
Right. Right.
and I thought I was broken. I thought it was me. And okay, so being on antidepressants for a while didn't help either. But we were never taught as women about our own pleasure. And, we were always taught that it was intercourse.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's funny because what I love is that this talk has inspired women. They'll see me or they'll recognize me or we'll be on some kind of meeting and they'll just start sharing their stories just as you did. And I love that because I don't know. I agree with you. I don't know if our generation has really had that opportunity just to have these open, frank conversations. I mean, we talk about, gynecological problems, but what about the gynecological pleasures? And more, I am seeing that this is kind of a really relevant topic. There was just an article in the New York Times a day or two ago about a female, I think she's a gynecologist. I have to go back and read that article a little more in depth, but she studies the clitoris. And she said, this is not, it's a part of the body I never learned about in medical school. I didn't even know anything about from a medical standpoint. And some of the medical procedures, including just episiotomies, have the potential of damaging the clitoris. And the clitoris is an amazing organ because its sole function is for pleasure. It has no other use except to bring women pleasure. Men don't have an organ like that, only women do. And yet our sexual pleasure is secondary, if at all. And it's like, really? Because our bodies are designed for pleasure, it has a specific organ for pleasure. And yet doctors, the medical field, women in general negate it. And they don't understand the structure of it, which is huge. It is not just what is visible, and what it can really mean when you take ownership of that part of your body specifically, and then your body in general.
And I think really it can be, for lack of a better word, tragic in midlife, because, you
Mm,
know, that's when our hormones are changing, and that's when you can have
yeah.
different challenges when it comes to having sex and having pleasure. But for me, I don't know if I was, part of the few, but there was something about me that just wanted to explore my own sexuality further when I sort of hit midlife. And yes, part of it did come from self exploration, because if I couldn't figure out what was going to
Absolutely.
do it for me, then how could I even begin to communicate that to my husband?
Right.
And we've been together. I've been with my
Yeah.
husband since I was 18, 19, right? And
Oh, it's
I'm about
amazing.
to turn I'm about to turn 50. But having those conversations, that's awkward, because you
It's
oh
vulnerable.
yeah,
Yeah.
because how do you communicate what you want, what you need, in a way that you're not making the other person think or feel that they're doing something wrong? Because, I admit that the female body is pretty complicated at the best of times.
Oh,
So I
absolutely.
really feel
Yep.
bad for the men in this situation, because it's like, if I don't get it, how the hell are they gonna get it?
It's funny you say that, Lucy, because when I used to teach, I was an undergraduate professor for a long part of my career, and I would teach a section on sex, gender, and sexuality. And I would say almost verbatim what I said. I feel bad for the men who sleep with women because they have no frame of reference from their own bodies. So it's not like a lesbian who at least has that as a frame of reference. And now they're trying to figure it out. And like you said, for a lot of women, we haven't taken the time to explore our bodies to be able to communicate. And when I work with couples, I would say 95% of the men who love and just want to make their female significant other happy will say, just tell me what you want. Give me the script. I will follow the script. But if they don't have the script, and if they don't have the script because their partner doesn't have her own script, they are literally like just searching in the dark for what might work. And then it leads to frustration or discontent, or women just give up. And I think that plays into the, again, global standard that, at a certain age, sex doesn't matter, particularly for women. And I am appalled when I hear that, because I said, I think sex is even more important after age 40, because, and certainly we have to figure out maybe new ways and different ways and use of lubricant that we never use, healthy lubricant, hopefully. I understand that, but that ability to connect is more important when you get older. The ramifications of sexual release for managing stress, depression, there's some research around that it also helps not cure or fix dementia, but mitigate some of the symptoms of dementia. Like, there's no downside to continuing a sex life, and there's no reason it has to stop. Not with today's medical technology, technological technology. There's a lot of options, and it hurts my heart when I hear women or couples say, yeah, we just don't, sex isn't important anymore. I'm like, oh, that's what you convinced yourself of, but it can still be a really vibrant part of any relationship.
And I can certainly speak to the sense of empowerment that you have when you're, in control of your sexual self. Like, it's a game changer. And I don't, I really sort of embrace that sexual side of myself, more in midlife. And I actually did something, some would say crazy, some would say brave. I did a boudoir session, but instead of being lingerie, I told the photographer, I said, I'm going to do this 100% nude. Just because I wanted to own myself exactly as I was. I'm curvy. I'm a plus size girl, but I wanted to own that. And it was funny. And I came out of that and I felt like I was on top of the world. But my husband asked, he goes, can I come watch? And he's like, it's not from a sexual point of view, but he's like, I want to see you in your power.
Yes.
And then the photographer then asked if I would sign a release so she could use them in her own promotion. And I said, yes. I said, if I can't put it out there. And those pictures are out there on Facebook and Instagram.
Oh, good. Now I get
to I'll just send them to you.
Awesome.
You don't have to go looking. Because
that epitomizes what we're talking about. Like, I had a mentor, unfortunately, she died last February, but she was probably one of the most significant women in my life. And I will never forget, I probably met her when she was my age now. So in her 50s, and I was in my early 30s, with all the insecurity that comes with, I think, for a lot of women, especially younger women. And I remember her saying one piece of advice that rings through my head probably daily. She said, when you look in the mirror on a given day, you will never look younger or better than you do right at that moment, because every day we age. She's like, so appreciate it. Instead of, denigrating yourself when you look in the mirror each day, appreciate where you are, because each day it's going to change and you can't stop that. And I love the newer, some of the celebrities and some of the more recognizable individuals, especially women in our world, who are coming out and just saying, no, we're not doing this anymore. It's not that aging is negative or bad. It is what it is, and it's okay. Jamie Lee Curtis, who I have admired for decades, she just did an interview, a real brief, it was all over social media 2 days ago, with Drew Barrymore, and she said, this is ridiculous. We are trying to tell women that they have to keep filling and fixing and tightening when this is just part of life. And why can't we embrace it as beautiful? And I think some of the most beautiful women are people like Jamie Lee Curtis or Helen Mirren and Drew Barrymore, who haven't had the surgery. And I understand the pressure, particularly in their industry, but it is just a constant strive for perfection, and that undermines women more than anything, I
It
believe.
does. And recently here in Canada, we had a bit of a, not a scandal, but sort of like a to do, because one of our major news networks fired
I know
one
what
of our
story.
senior
Yeah,
anchors, Lisa Laflamme, and
yeah,
she was a pillar. And part of it, and
yeah.
basically what the story is that during COVID, she just decided to embrace her gray hair and went fully gray, and she looked stunning. And
She
she was
did.
released from her contract, and there the public outcry was beautiful because it showed, you
Hmm.
know, we're not willing to stand for this anymore, because basically we've had male anchors well into their
Yeah.
late 70s,
Oh
like
gosh,
with like
yeah.
ear hair that you can see from everywhere. But that's okay. That's okay if you know
Right.
the guys have ear hair and the eyebrows going like this, but God forbid a woman go gray.
Yeah. It's appalling. I as I mentioned earlier, I have two daughters in our blended family. We have four kids, but two of them are girls, and it hurts my heart when I look at their experience, and I just thought we'd be so much farther along.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly here in America, we're dealing with the whole Roe versus Wade debacle, which I still can't wrap my brain around, even though it's been like 5 months. But I just thought we would be farther, and we're not. And that's why I think these types of conversations and the talk that I did is so important, just to keep putting it in everybody's face. People who are, yeah, allies and advocates, and then people on the other side who are like, not so sure about this, because if we go quiet, then things are just going to snowball and in a direction that at least most of the women I know and really respect, don't want it to go. So this kind of conversation that you're facilitating, Lucy, is so important, because otherwise I'm not sure where we're going to end up. And that's a sad
I don't
prospect
think
to
we're going
me.
to go there. I think the pendulum is swinging the other way. And the more that we come together and we share our collective voices, then, you know, we are going to move things. But I think that starts with being able to communicate for ourselves within our own relationships. You know,
Yes.
all of us can appreciate that, you know, your 20s, your 30s, you're busy living life, you're busy building your careers, and when
Mm,
you start getting to that mid-age point, I think that's when you sort of have an awakening and you're realizing that, hey, I'm halfway through my life.
mm,
Is this how I want to spend the other half of my life? And for
right.
those of us that are married, having those, or in long-term relationships, having those conversations can be really hard,
Mhm.
because they're conversations you've never had before. You've never had time for
Right.
them before. So how
Right.
do we even begin? Because it's probably it's gonna be awkward, but how do we just take those first tiny baby steps?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. And I get that a lot from the couples that I work with. And one of the ways that I structure the conversations for couples is that we look at their relationship like a business. And it's a very unusual and uncomfortable sometimes place for couples to do that, because they're used to thinking about their relationship subjectively and emotionally. And certainly emotions are part of a relationship, but very often, if the emotions are not positive, then they get in the way of any kind of objective thinking or strategic thinking. And that's where the relationship communication falls apart. So, what I usually start couples off by doing is saying, okay, tell me what your communication is like at work, or whatever work looks like, whether it's that you volunteer, whether that you're in an office, or anything in between. How do you communicate with these people that are at a professional level? And individuals are great at telling me exactly what they do and what their strengths are in communication and how they do it. And I ask them, how do you use those strengths or skills in your relationship? And that's where they freeze and say, well, no, but it's different. And I'm like, but why is it different? If you're successful having those communications and ways of communicating outside of the home, why can't you pull in some of that inside of the home? And it takes practice, of course, because couples aren't used to doing that. They're used to just reacting and feeling, which are okay as long as they work for the relationship. If they're undermining the relationship, then a different approach is important. So with couples, I have them sit down and we start right from the beginning by creating a mission statement. which a lot of couples
Love that.
don't have. Or what the funnier ones are the ones that have them in their heads. They're like, oh, no, we have, a general mission statement. We both, know what it is. So those couples, I have them separately write down what they think their mission statement is that they believe the other person aligns with. And every single time there are significant points that are different, and they're shocked. They're like, I thought we both knew, but how do you know if it's not written down? If you haven't actually had the conversation to sketch out, here's our compass. Here's what's going to keep us grounded in those moments that things are feeling a little shaky. So we start with the mission statement, just like any successful business does. And then we start to implement other business strategies that work to create the structure for a relationship.
So how is this different than, because you're coaching couples? How is that different than therapy? Because I think that's usually the first thing that couples default to is when there's a problem or a conflict in the relationship. It's, we need to go to couples therapy. But this sounds like it's something very different.
It is. I did couples therapy for a while when I was practicing as a mental health professional, and it's draining for the couple, draining for the professional. And like much of therapy, unfortunately, it's still seen as an intervention crisis model, which doesn't align with how I view the world. To me, it's about being proactive and preventative. And that's the first difference between couples coaching and couples therapy. The other difference is that certainly if there are clinical issues, so I always screen couples for recent abuse, addiction, infidelity, or a loss of a significant family member, because those issues need to be addressed in therapy from that standpoint of sometimes digging into the past, looking at these past situations to get really some kind of strategies around those emotional issues. But again, with coaching, I'll tell couples, we can't change the past. So as long as there isn't those recent influences, we're going to focus on where you are now, how you want your present to be, and then where you want to get to in the future. So it's very much so. Couples hesitate initially when they're looking for support because they know that therapy can be painful and emotional. And typically one member of a couple, more so than the other, is like, nope, I don't want to do that. But with coaching, I tell them right from the beginning, we're not, like, emotions don't have a place in what we're going to do here, because I want you to think in that objective way. And even positive emotions can sometimes get in the way of really strategically thinking. So it's grounding them in this platform that they've never thought of in terms of their relationship so that they can approach it with strategy. And unlike therapy, coaching is very much generated by the individual. They're the experts on their relationship. I don't go home with them, and I don't want to. So they're the experts. So it's me prompting them with questions and offering suggestions for them to consider, and them deciding how they want to do it. And with me, there's a lot of homework. So in between sessions, they are practicing strategies, and they have concrete points that they're going to come back and report on when they're back in session, so that there's a progress and a consistent progress if they so choose.
So is couples coaching, just for couples that are, say, in a crisis point, or is it something that works for anybody regardless of where your relationship is standing?
It does. Yeah, the majority of couples I work with are just in a rut. They don't want to get divorced. They're not in a crisis. They're just not as happy or satisfied as they want to be. Or they're going through some transition that's making things feel different in their relationship. So that's the majority of people that come in. They don't want it to get to the crisis point. And those are the ones I love working with, because they aren't at that do or die situation. A smaller percentage of people that go into couples coaching are at the beginning of a relationship or a commitment. So they're about to get engaged, they're about to get married, they're about to move in together, they're about to blend their families, and they know that they want to set up a plan for success. They don't want to die. I mean, it is amazing to me that couples will spend in America like about $25,000 on average and 250 hours planning their maybe 5 to 6 hour wedding day. But when I asked them, okay, so what have you devoted in terms of time or finances to planning your actual committed relationship? All I get is crickets. And to me, it doesn't have to be an equitable in terms of hours and money, but taking some time to really concentrate on how are we going to proceed so that we, as best possible, have a plan for success. Otherwise, we're just winging it. And I don't know about you, Lucy, there's very few things in my life that I just wing it. I have a plan for my career. I have a plan for my finances. We have plans for our vacations, like how it's going to go and how we want it to go. But not many people do that with their relationship. And I
Yeah,
think that can
definitely.
help.
I mean, I've definitely been winging a lot of things over the last few years, but more from the approach of, okay, I'm just going to see where this goes. And, we've had, as a couple,
Sure.
we've had a lot of flexibility in what we're doing anyways. Um, Fortunately, one of the plus sides of what I call my midlife meltdown was really having to have those conversations, because there was a crisis point where we weren't sure if we were going to make it. And we both quickly realized that no, 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 this is what we want. So we had to
Right.
find a way to come back together and get on that same page. And I'm going to say that things are better now than they have been ever. And I'm going to say that we're more in love now than we ever were. Even, I got married at 21. And I'm going to say that, everything is stronger, deeper, and better. But it's funny because like literally, it was yesterday or the day before, I had a conversation with my husband and I said, okay, up until this point, in all things of our life, we've just been kind of like going with the flow and seeing what happens. But I said, I really want to have something different for next year. I want us to sit down, and I said, call me crazy, but can we have some sort of like strategy planning session for 2023
Yeah.
so that we
Yeah.
can figure out what we want to do?
That's awesome.
What do we want to
That's
accomplish as a
awesome.
couple? Where do we want our lives to be? Because we're trying to feel out, we're ready to ditch, the traditional 9 to 5. What do we want that life to look like? Canada in the winter, I don't care where you are, it sucks.
Yeah.
All of these
Hmm.
things. And we've been kind of going on a hope and a prayer so far. And it's like, no,
Yeah.
I really think that it's time to sit down and create a plan. We would do it for our businesses, so why wouldn't we be doing it for
Right.
ourselves? So this conversation today is just, synchronizing everything. And I'm really,
Yeah. And you say it's crazy, but exactly what you said, the strategy session, that is another point that I use with couples saying, okay, so once a quarter, sitting down to have a business meeting, a relationship business meeting. And that's where you take a look at your goals from last quarter. Did you hit them? If you didn't, why? And what can you do differently? If you did, great. What are the new goals for the next quarter? And then couples, because I also talk about delineation of roles and who's the CFO and who's the COO and who's the fleet manager. And we recognize
head
all
chef
those
and
points.
bottle washer.
How do you yeah, I mean, whatever roles the couple delineates, that we make sure that, because again, a lot of couples get sucked into that, oh, it's 50-50. I'm like, not usually. Like, usually, some might have more responsibilities, but they're lighter, and the other one might have heavier ones, but less, or it's however the couple makes sure that both parties feel like there is some kind of equitable contribution. So in those quarterly strategy sessions, they report out, here's where we are with our finances, and what do you think about these options for investing or anything. It doesn't mean that one person is in charge of everything. They're just the oversight, and then they can provide the report out to the other person, because if both people are trying to do
It's
everything,
exhausting.
you're watering down. Yeah, it's exhausting. You're watering down the things that they're either really skilled at, or the things that are their focus. So yeah, so I don't think that's crazy at all. I think
And
that's
you have
awesome.
a gift for our listeners of the Pod Summit to help them
Dude.
get the conversations going. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So one of the tools that I use, real easy, no huge commitment, which I think a lot of couples like at the start, is on my website. They can go to get a values inventory. And it starts a dialogue between myself and the other person. So there's a personal touch. It's not just an automatron at the other side, but they actually are walking through a series of steps to clearly identify their true core values. And again, I think a lot of people say they have a general idea of what their core values are, but this articulates it at a very concrete level. And then from that, they get to, if they so choose, if both partners engage in this activity, they get to have that conversation of, oh, I didn't even realize that was one of the most important things to you. Or, oh my gosh, we really are aligned. Because it doesn't mean if your values are divergent that you have to get divorced. It just means, okay, how do you recognize that in your relationship? And how do you use that as a strength. So maybe there are some areas that one person takes on because that is aligned with their core value, and the other partner takes on something else because it's more aligned with their values. So it's a really easy, gentle way of having a concrete data to then have those conversations.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So to our listeners, to get your values inventory, make sure you go to nectargrowth.com. That's necturegrowth.com. I'll have all of the links in there. And being part of this Pod Summit, you are going to receive the first 30 days free. But I know you're going to want to hang out longer because we're going to have more of these great conversations. It also has lots of resources, and we're going to be adding to that every month. We're also going to be hosting our fireside chats. And this is where you can connect with women just like you and share in authentic conversations. And yes, when we need to, we are going to vent. So make sure you join us at necturegrowth.com. You can also find links in the show notes and in your daily Pod Summit emails. Thank you for joining us. I look forward to connecting with you. And thank you, Robin, for sharing your story and your expertise today.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. It was an honor.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creative.